successful. My sophomore year, I wrote a speech about playing stupid games and winning stupid prizes. My junior year, I wrote a paper on the 5 main themes of chemistry. If you know, you know. And now finally, this year, I'm able to write my last academic paper, followed by this speech, IVF and the Pursuit of God's Kingdom. All of these speeches have something in common besides me. They're all tied back to moral ambiguity and the gray area struggle between black and white. The problem with this gray area is that it really is gray. It is hard to understand and hard to navigate, but that doesn't mean that truth is absent. Here at MCA, that is one of our main goals. We are called to seek the ultimate truth, no matter how deep it may be hidden. So how do we find truth in something so complex and argued as IVF? We use our resources and see what God has to say about the matter at hand. Genesis 1:28. And God blessed them, and God said to them, Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and the birds of the heavens, and every living thing that moves on the earth. God's original purpose and plan was for us to glorify and honor Him by adding to His kingdom by being good stewards with what He has given us here on earth. In this context, in vitro fertilization is a medical procedure that assists in pregnancy by fertilizing an egg outside the body and implanting it into the uterus. Here it's easy to see IVF as purely a scientific achievement, but when viewed through a Christian perspective, it is also the reflection of a grace-given miracle, a power through which God continues to work in human hands. While trying to decide what to say in this final speech, Mr. Z recommended that I read through the Old Testament, Matthew chapter 6, and the end of Revelation to see what they all had in common. In doing this, I realized what he was trying to get me to see and understand as to why it could be so important to my thesis. Psalm 103:19. The Lord has established his throne in heaven, and he rules over all. Looking at the New Testament, this is even more the case. Matthew chapters 5 through 7, or better known as the Sermon on the Mount, tells us how to live in fulfillment of righteousness here on earth. Revelation 21:3. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, Look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them, and he will be their God. From the past, present, and future, this message remains. God's kingdom is at hand, here and now. Every child comes with a message that God is not yet discouraged of us. IVF raises serious ethical concerns that deserve careful attention. It is expensive, which can make having children seem tied to financial means rather than received as a gift. Some ethicists, such as Michael J. Sandel, warn that reproductive technologies can encourage a drive to mastery, where human life is shaped by preference rather than accepted as given. This raises concerns about genetic selection and possibility of valuing certain traits and lives over others, which conflicts with the Christian belief that all people are made in God's image. These are also difficult questions surrounding embryos created through IVF. Some are frozen, discarded, and used for research, leading organizations like the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission to argue that risks treating early human life as expendable. If life begins at fertilization, as many Christians believe, then these questions raise and hold real moral weight. Even outside of Christian theology, thinkers like Leon Koss caution that reproductive technologies blur the line between healing and manufacturing, shifting our understanding of children from gifts to products. This sharpens the central question, do the ends justify the means? While reading Bioethics in the Christian Life by seminary professor and theologian David Van Drunen, he discussed these things and later provided clarification for them in our interview. He explained seeking medical help during infertility is not inherently wrong, but IVF can cross ethical boundaries depending on how it is practiced. Because of this, Christians must approach IVF with discipline and discernment. The desire for children, though good, does not justify methods that compromise the dignity of life. Instead, believers are called to act with integrity, ensuring that both their motives and their methods honor God. The most interesting aspect of my interview with Dr. Ben Doak was when the question was raised about whether Christians are cheating God's game of life for creation by using external resources when unable to conceive naturally. His response clarified much of the concern. He explained that although many processes may raise moral questions, the purpose remains the same, bringing children into the world to add to the kingdom of God. We are all made in his image, no matter how we are made. If we are cheating in God's game of life, then we break the rules all the time. When we use antibiotics, when someone is in a vegetative state, when we perform heart bypass surgery, the list goes on. We do all of these things with faith in God, with hope that he will use all of these for good according to his will, not in rebellion against God. Some argue that only God can save them from pain and heartache, fully trusting that God will heal them himself, and if not, it must be their time to go. Through reason and logic, we know that this argument is not helpful or convincing. When we read God's word and acknowledge what he has blessed us with, we see that technology and medicine were always in his plan to help humanity flourish. Luke 5:31. Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. God is the ultimate healer. He has also blessed us with his immense knowledge and power for the glory and the good of his kingdom. Classical Christian theology, picking up in Paul's words, 1 Corinthians 13:13. So now faith, hope, and love abide, but the greatest of these is love. Has identified faith, hope, and love as the principal theological or Christian virtues. Faith is the fount of all other virtues, trusting in God's sovereignty, even in suffering, including infertility. With the three intertwined, hope from faith comes next, for hope springs forth from faith. Hope, a forward-looking confidence that God is working beyond what we can see, even through difficult processes like IVF. This means IVF cannot be our ultimate hope, but it can be a meaningful secondary one used under God's authority, not a replacement for him. Together, faith, hope lead to love, the greatest virtue. Love shapes how we approach IVF by keeping the dignity of life at the center, guiding both our motives and our methods. In this way, IVF is no longer just a medical procedure, but a spiritual journey, one that calls for trusting God, patience in uncertainty, and a commitment to honor him in all things. As Christians, we are called to hold all of these when facing difficult decisions in life. You may never need IVF, but you will always need faith, hope, and love. And that is why they are the guiding fruits of the spirits for any trials we encounter in this life. Wonderfully Made, A Protestant Theology of the Body by author John Calleigh discusses how the physical body is such an important dwelling place for Christ in us. This proves that the product is just as important as the process. Going through IVF and successfully obtaining a baby is just a step to what matters most. When that real-life baby is born in the flesh, it produces a physical body that can in turn benefit the pursuit of God's kingdom. This alone is so impactful to giving us the chance to glorify and honor God. Monk and theologian Martin Luther stated, "Everything must become nothing but holiness in every Christian, even though he still lives in the flesh and is indeed impure in and of himself. However, through faith, he is altogether pure." This is a holiness of not your own, so that God does not wish that everything we do in this life to be impure, but precious and pleasing to honor this child, to honor the Lord. What does he touch? My living and dying, my walking, standing, my suffering, misfortune, and trials, all of which he bore, passed through, and experienced. Jesus makes all aspects of life in the body pure and holy for us. Through baptism, he clothes us with his body. Through faith in him, our bodily life is just as pure and as holy as his. So when God looks at us, he sees nothing unclean or unholy in us and our bodies. Nothing could be better than that. Without this physical body, there is no temple for the Spirit to dwell. This is where God is to be found. This is where we meet with God. But what a strange place it is. It is both physical and spiritual, earthly and heavenly, visible and invisible. Everything is through this body. The body language that we convey, communications, and conversations cannot lead others to Christ without it. So each person is a bodily outpost of heaven on earth. In each congregation, the resurrected body of Jesus is the bridge between heaven and earth. In each congregation, his flesh is the new living way into the Father's presence. Without our body, we ultimately have no access to him. This means that with IVF, that we are called together with eternity as the main focus, we now have a chance to add multiple bodies to the kingdom that might not have been added otherwise. This is not to say that God would not work in other ways, but that he has blessed us so immensely with this scientific and miracle-based achievement that only he has full control over. Science will never replace God, and it will absolutely never be capable of recreating the gift of life. He giveth and he taketh away will always be a true statement. He determines on his own time and plan when a person is born and when they die. But with our faith, we know that life here is not life, and that death here for a believer is not death at all. Through these bioethical issues and moral obligations, it does not matter what is viewed as right or wrong. It matters how we walk through life in God's eyes. If it was not God's will, he would not allow it to come into fruition. Without him, we are nothing, and without a body to embody him through, we are still nothing. Our bodies are destined for life with God. He knit us together in our mother's womb before science was ever a thought. His plan for us has always been the same. Ephesians 2:10. For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. He has breathed life into every baby time after time. Every child comes with a message that God is not yet discouraged of us. Thank you.
All right. Welcome to the table. Do you want some water?
Sure. Yes.
Thank you for your words today. And ice. You got ice in your cup. That's nice. Thank you for your words today. As we're beginning, I'm reminded of the fall. And in the fall, you came to me and stated that for my senior thesis, I'm reading a book called Atomic Habits, and I'm going to talk about habits. And that's not what you really talked about today. And so my question as we're beginning is, Calleigh from the fall had this like dead set opinion of this is what I'm going to talk about, and you're not talking about it. What changed in that amount of time? Like, what led you to this one?
Well, I never even finished that book, and that was not even on my agenda to do, and I was also never dead set on that topic during the fall, or whatever that means. Whenever we discussed our topics, I had about 3 topics picked out, and I knew which one I was going to do, but I wanted to give you some other opinions just because they were required. But I did know what I was definitely going to do. So that was kind of a backup, but I already knew in my head that I was going to do that. So Atomic Habits never even was a thought in this. I probably made it through chapter 2.
That's great.
Yeah.
Because as you told the whole audience, I told you to read a whole bunch of things to be prepared for today. And I read all of Atomic Habits to prepare for today because you told me that. And so I read that whole book, and now I'm a little bit behind my preparation because I didn't read all of Van Buren's book. So I just appreciate that you were my senior project, and the same thing you blamed me for. I guess I got it in return.
Right.
Thank
Yes.
you for that.
Yes.
So with this topic, this is something that you care about. Also, with your plans for your future beyond MCA, it's something that you care about. And so, how does this topic and your future plans, how are they intertwined? How do they impact each other?
They impact each other because after seeing and going through all of this with my personal family, I am now in pursuit of a biology degree to become a labor and delivery nurse so I can experience this for hopefully a career that I enjoy.
Awesome. The thought of being just Atomic Habits, you have some habits here, right? Because you say that we are, as Christians, we're wonderfully made, and IVF is a result of our pursuit of God's kingdom. And so we have a pursuit, and then we have a certain posture. And so you jump into the 3 virtues of our posture is faith, hope, and love. And so why are those the 3 kind of guiding topics that you sought out that it kind of seems like they're the guiding topics for all of life? Like, why for IVF are those your 3 ideas?
Yes, sir. Because that is also such a big ordeal and something, a huge process that you're walking through in your life if you do need to go through that path. And yes, it is a general idea that you do need for anything in that matter or anything that holds that much importance to you. But as you know, as I was writing through my original speech, how each virtue had basically its own page. And in this speech, it was all combined together in one paragraph so I could get the full idea of it instead of having to break it down for 30 minutes because there was so much depth in verses and correlation between them. But they're so preeminent because it's going to be really, really hard to walk through processes, not just IVF, but especially IVF, to walk through processes like that without holding those virtues, because faith is the foundation. Hope, you're looking for something that you can't see, and with that faith, it allows you not to be as disappointed if things don't go as planned, because we don't live in a perfect world. And you have to have love to guide all of those. That's why love can stand on its own, without faith and hope. But those are also the virtues and foundation before that. But love is so powerful, just to hold the center as the dignity of life. And it's going to be really, really, really difficult to walk through something that serious without those virtues.
Okay. For next year, you leave MCA. What is one place where you see those things and their need to help you as you're pursuing a career in this?
I guess just on the hospital floors where all these babies are being born. I did an internship over the summer, with the Medical Explorers, my junior summer, and I had a really hard time seeing the NICU floor, and the mother baby unit, and respiratory and everything, and how all of these babies were alone. There was no parents to be found. They were having babies without a spouse somewhere, and it just felt really empty, and I had to request to please get me off of this floor because I couldn't handle it anymore. But they would be needed in places like that so people could have faith and stand strong in something to prepare for their next season of their life with a new baby.
Okay. Thanks. I'm going to pass the mic and get some more questions later.
Yes, sir.
Calleigh, you did a great job. You present very well. My first question is, you said in your paper, and you said it in your speech as well, that that IVF benefits the pursuit of God's kingdom. And you also said, we have a chance through IVF to add multiple bodies to the kingdom that might not have been added otherwise. What are you saying when you say that it benefits the pursuit or adds bodies to the kingdom of God?
Without the physical body, there's no physical way to add to the kingdom. So whenever you have that baby, of course, in the flesh, and you raise them up, because this is all in a Christian's perspective, and you raise them up to honor and glorify the Lord, then you're adding to his kingdom and pursuing his kingdom and bringing other people to the feet of Jesus.
So what happens if they choose not to be a Christ follower and not to follow Jesus?
And that makes it a little bit more sad, but still true, and it's still difficult. But you just have to pray, because there's not answers to all of those questions. That's what I was discussing with my mother last night. Is they may not be brought up. Their parents may not have those same beliefs, but they might have still chose to go through this. But you just have to hope and pray that everything will work together for his good.
So what is the Great Commission that Jesus gave to his disciples and to us as Christ followers?
To bring people to him.
Okay. So would you say that was be through testimony and leading others to Christ, or would it be, I'm just clarifying just to make sure, would it be through, do you accomplish that through IVF, or do you accomplish that through preaching the gospel?
All of the above. I think it can be one big testimony of his faithfulness.
Okay. What did you mean by every child comes with a message that God is not yet discouraged of us?
Well, everyone's always thinking that the world's going to end soon, and the rapture, and that everyone's favorite thing to say kind of in this modern day and age is, why would I want to bring children into this world? Why? Do you not see the world, how fallen it is, how corrupt we are? But with every life that God gives us, he is telling us that there is hope for us.
Okay, that's good. My favorite part about your thesis, and I think it must be your favorite part too, because this is where you teared up, but about the holiness of God and how we can be, we're precious and pleasing to him. And I think that we often obsess over our sin, and God obsesses over our righteousness. And I think that's very beautiful what you wrote. How do we get our eyes off of our sin practically and onto keeping our eyes focused on Jesus?
Mm-hmm.
How do you do that?
Knowing your identity is found in him. And that's why I had such a hard time trying to get through that section, and especially what I found in that book, because I'm not just the biggest fan of Martin Luther, but whenever I read all this different stuff that he had to say that wasn't like the 5,000th thesis or whatever we have to learn here, that he is like really, really, really smart and really intelligent and personal. It was like reading a poem, and it was so beautifully written. And I just thought that God has so much more to say about us in his word than we say about ourselves all the time. Like being where we're not unclean or impure in his eyes. Like that is such a big deal.
That's awesome. What you started off saying that there's a lot of gray areas in life.
Yes.
What would you say the gray area of IVF is?
Probably having the multiple embryos. Well, I guess there is more gray areas, but having that use and power over technology and how it's advancing, and that's what we talked about with the moral ambiguity, is that it's just so unclear. But if you do some deeper diving, it's not that unclear.
What do you think about a nuclear family that pursues IVF because they're unable to get pregnant versus a single woman who never got a chance to be married, never found that person, but she wants to be a mom? Do you think that that is a gray area is it still adding to the kingdom the way God designed it for a single mom to pursue IVF and have a child and be a single mom?
I think so. Yeah.
Like you think that's God's plan? Or I'm just asking, like,
I think that I don't want to say okay, but I think that it is still acceptable in his eyes.
if they pray about it and pursue?
If they go about it the way that he has called us to. Yes.
Okay. I'll pass the mic on.
Hi, Calleigh. Wonderful
Not bad,
job.
go.
Okay, there we are. Wonderful job, Calleigh. Okay, so I was thinking as soon as you said gray areas, I was like, oh no, because I'm just a very black and white thinker, and have a really hard time dealing with anything that is in the gray area.
Me and you both.
Yeah, so I wanted to hear like, how did you wrap your mind around this topic that is in the gray area, and what would you tell someone who is a very black and white thinker, like I think yourself? What were some things that helped you as you were dealing with how to think about this?
Nothing, because it is so gray and it is so hard to navigate. And especially going through apologetics this year with Mr. Westfall, we just kept going over all of these topics that were so broad and had no clear-cut answer, and it was just so frustrating. So every time I would go in there and bring my next rough draft of my paper that Mr. Z had graded, he'd go, "How's it going, Calleigh?" Not any better than it was the last time. But every single class, and just seeing that this is not the only gray area and that things like this are really common, and that's the whole definition of ethics, is the study of what is right or wrong and how we ought to live. And bioethics has to do with the biological side and medicine side of that. And it is hard for someone like me to understand a gray area or wrap my head around it, because I do understand that things should be black and white, but what's it called? Like if you straddle the fence, like you need to be on one side or something like that. You know what I'm saying? That fence thing, like that's not a good analogy because that's hard to understand too. You can't have your cake and eat it too. The grass isn't greener, or something like that. But for me to wrap my head around it, or for me, well, I just wanted to be right. I really just wanted to be right. This is something that I'm passionate about, and I wanted to see the truth in it, and I wanted to line up with my ideals and how I see it. And it ultimately just didn't, because I'm not God, and my IQ isn't 410. So it was really hard for me to get through, and I had to read multiple books and multiple passages, and there's just so many different views on it. But with it being a gray area, God still has truth about it. There's multiple gray areas in life. Anything that has to do with ethics or bioethics, it's all blurry. But it doesn't have to be blurry. But what is viewed as morally right or wrong doesn't matter here on earth. It's what God has to say about it.
So then, like following that, what role does seeking the Lord play in trying to figure out these gray areas?
Finding verses with everything in Genesis. I had a really hard time reading the Sermon on the Mount and seeing where that really pertained to this at all. But it had to do with living in fulfillment of his righteousness. But the main area how to get through this was that the kingdom is at hand here and now. It's been at hand here and now. The fall happened. That's why we have all these struggles. The kingdom still hasn't been fully realized because Christ hasn't come back yet. But we are the kingdom, and we are here, and we are now.
So at what point, I know Ms. Schultz kind of talks about the pursuit of building our kingdom versus building the Lord's kingdom. So like just in a broader sense, at what point does something become a pursuit of building our kingdom? How do we know that we are then seeking our kingdom to be built versus seeking to build the Lord's kingdom?
Building our kingdom. What is that, like population or like our own kingdom?
Yeah.
Well, building our kingdom would be, that is what I learned from the Sermon on the Mount, was our motives. That's where the motives and method thing came in. But God doesn't call us. Everything he says in there is the meek and the merciful, they will be rewarded. And those who pray in private, those who seek him in private, that you're not doing things for show. And that he honors that, and he finds that pleasing to him. And I have it written on a note card in here somewhere, but I'm telling myself not to look at it because I do know the answer. But to live in righteousness, and it's not about our own. It's not about our own selfish desires. It is our heart posture that matters, because we are called to have a heart after God's own heart. And whenever we do that, it was self-interest is the word that was used. So that would be how you're building your own kingdom. Whenever you're over here picking the hair color and the gender and the eyes and the skin color and everything else that can possibly be chosen, like an avatar in a game character or something. But you just lead it all up to God, and that's how you make sure your heart's in the right posture. You don't cheat.
Yeah. What role does stewardship play in all of this? What role does stewardship play in what we have already here on this earth, and then also in the possibilities of IVF?
Stewardship, using all of these advancements and technologies for the good, not using it to make designer babies or to benefit people in Hollywood or to promote people having children that don't want to mess up their bodies, or all those things that have to do with anything with bringing children into the world. But I already forgot your question, but
Stewardship.
Stewardship.
What role does that play?
Stewardship and dominion, but knowing that God is the one that has ultimate control, and he giveth and he taketh away, and he has the final say. So stewardship, he's just giving us this stuff and wanting us to use it in an honorable way for him.
Yeah. So if we do take the path of IVF, how would you talk to someone who might say that by taking this path, you are preventing God from potentially teaching you something in the waiting or the patience of infertility that struggle might bring, versus stepping into it and saying, I'm going to pursue IVF?
Can you say that preventing part again?
Yeah. So like at what, like the Lord has purpose in the struggles that we go through.
Mm-hmm.
And so at what point do you decide that it's a good idea to pursue IVF versus it might be the better idea to, or the Lord is wanting you to sit in the waiting or the struggle of infertility?
I believe that would be something that causes for lots of prayer and meditation and listening. Not doing things on your own accord, or just being impatient and uncertainty and I can't have a baby, so I'm going to go through this, and oh shoot, it didn't work, let's spend some more money and let's see if it'll happen again, and the cycle just continues. But I think I discussed this too, but God's not going to put us through something that we can't handle, and he's either going to use us as an example or not. So if our faith is strong enough to handle something like that, and being patient while waiting, or maybe it's not his answer. What's that saying? God answers all our prayers, but maybe not in the way we want him to, or something like that. Yeah. But I think that pertains to this situation too. But just really listening and reading and doing research if this is the best option for me and how can it be pleasing to the Lord. But you may need to wait like Sarah and Abraham. Sarah waited years and years and years and years and years, and then Abraham tried to cheat that process by having a wife by someone that wasn't Sarah, and God didn't find that too terribly pleasing. And then Sarah had her own baby. So I think it's just being faithful while waiting and having that hope and seeing something that we can't see and having faith so we're not absolutely devastated when things don't work out the way we want them to.
Yeah. Do you think God intended for us to use scientific methods to be fruitful and multiply in the first place?
I read over Genesis. Well, I don't know. I don't remember what I read anymore. But that it was. I think it's 1 Corinthians 10:23, and it says that I have the right to use anything, but not everything edifies. And yes. Oh, and also in Genesis 1:27, God created man in his own image, male and female. He had created them. And then in Genesis 1:28, talking about being fruitful and multiply. Another question that's raised about that: does that verse only mean biological children? And I don't think so, because God has such a heart for adoption as well in the Bible. He talks about that. This can also play into that. And I can't remember your questions, but I just keep on talking and I don't know what they were anymore.
Okay, it's okay. Yeah,
Because I'm having so much fun.
you're almost there. You're almost there. Okay, so I have like two more questions.
Okay.
For you. One, how should we as Christians approach advances in medical technology? And you can take that in the form of IVF or just in general.
As a blessing that God's wisdom is continued to be imparted on us, because a lot of these people in these facilities are absolute geniuses, and that wisdom has to come from somewhere. I don't think all wisdom is the same. And then, of course, in the Bible it says, ask and receive, and I will give my wisdom generously without limit. And we say that all across the Bible with Solomon and everybody that was these absolute wonderfully minded people, and only that wisdom can come from God. But yes, I do believe that he desires for us to use the things that he has blessed us with. I don't think he'd be giving out all this wisdom willy-nilly if it just didn't work.
And then I guess maybe this kind of goes back to what we were talking about at the very beginning. But do you think that there's a right perspective for me to have as a Christian on IVF?
A right perspective.
Yeah, right. Like in quote marks. Like, is there this is how I should view it as a Christian?
No, I think we should be open-minded. Yeah.
Great. Thanks, Cal.
In the middle of your paper, you said the ends
Don't justify the
don't
means.
justify the means. Do you remember where that's from? In
You.
your great book.
No. This was not Aristotle, right?
Starts with the M, ends with Machiavelli. Right.
You lost me there.
So Machiavelli's the prince, right? He introduces this idea that if we want to maintain power and stability, then we should be able to justify anything as long as the end result is what we want.
No. False.
So, okay.
Did I beat you to your question?
No,
Oh.
I was about to give you the question. One of my thoughts with this is, how does this idea of, because another one of your favorite things besides Machiavelli apparently is the dystopian literature that
Right.
you're reading throughout this year.
Yes.
And so how does the idea of the ends justify the means come to play in those things that you don't like?
Well, none of those books ended happy, so how am I supposed to answer this?
Yeah.
The ends didn't justify the means. The whole thing sucked.
So what about for which one's your least favorite?
I guess the road.
Okay.
Yeah.
In the road, the ends justify the means. Where do you see that within the literature or the story of that book?
They had all these trials and tribulations all throughout the book. Everything was so gray. They were told to keep on carrying the flame, and which is like, I guess, a sense of hope and keep hoping. But by the end of it, the world was still gray. They still felt the same. The loss was greater, and it seemed like everything that they did didn't matter. Maybe they still had a bit of dignity left, but it didn't end the way it should have, or how it started.
Okay. And so the end of the book is horrible. The end of Brave New World is horrible, right? We finish in despair instead of hope. And so there's, in the literature you don't like, there is an element of characters trying to do something that will create hope, but in the end, it creates despair. And so we don't like that in the stories. And so what prevents like the story of IVF from being like this, where it is something that has this power to provide hope, but at the end, can this be a tool that creates despair? If we don't, like, what do we need to watch out for to prevent that from occurring?
Prevent despair. Is this one of those questions I can say I'm not sure?
Okay, you get one of those.
Okay.
Okay.
Prevent despair. Well, that's why those three preeminent. But okay,
You're
I
done.
figured.
Okay, so then you need to choose because you allude to these topics: chemistry, anatomy, government, and the Bible as your curriculum throughout your paper. And so I'm going to need you to elaborate on one of those. Which one do you want?
I'll choose anatomy.
Okay. So anatomy. Do the ends justify the means? Has that ever come up in that class?
No.
No. Okay. Does that class give you hope?
Yes.
Okay.
Also despair.
Okay. Why does it give you hope?
Hope that our bodies are so healthy and so beautifully made and intricately made that we have this energy and life inside of us to do great things for the kingdom.
Okay. In nursing school, you're going to have to take an ethics class that will help you with gray areas. But it seems like over and over and over, what you keep reminding us of is that in life, we don't have ethics classes, but there has to be an understanding of what God's plan and vision is for us as humans. And we have to operate in that appropriately in order to end up making choices that give us this hope instead of choose to do it our own way and we end up in despair. And so I appreciate your time today. Like this, I mean, your quotes and the thoughts that you had, they caused me to think about a lot of things. And so I really appreciate that. As we challenge you and question you and get to ask you questions, this is the model of the great conversation, which is at some point you need to ask questions as well, not just tell us things. And so for the final part, you get a chance to ask us a question in response. So
Okay.
do you have anything prepared?
No,
Okay.
I really don't. I really don't. I was probably just going to wing my questions, but I've heard a lot of people haven't had time to ask some questions, which isn't an excuse, but I still didn't have any prepared because I know all of you. So do you want to answer your question?
You get to, do you want me to ask you more questions instead? Or do you want to use your turn?
I'll try a question.
Okay. You ask us questions now.
Okay. What's your favorite thing that you learned throughout your time at DBU?
I would say that throughout my time at DBU, I learned that I'm not as great of a person as I thought I was. And I learned a lot of my ideas and my plans for life were pretty short-sighted. And I mean, I had plans of not coming to Midland. Like, I don't know what my plans were, but it was not coming to Midland. And so just understanding that my plans are flawed and that listening to God can, take you to a certain place and help you grow for a long time was probably the thing I learned.
Okay.
Mike, do you want to pass the mic?
Okay, what question am I answering?
Just came up with this one, but I think it's a good one. What has been the most important thing you learned while being married to Mr. Schultz for such a long time?
She just called you old.
Well, we just celebrated our 27th year, so I'll accept that old. I think that, I have a great husband and I love him dearly, but we don't always get along. And as we wrestle in our relationship of putting ourselves second and putting each other first, I think that the most beautiful thing that God has taught me is to really see how the covenant of marriage does truly represent how much he loves us and how much he loves us as his bride. And so just to see within the covenant of marriage that just the beauty of our relationship with the Lord. And so I think that being married I'm not the perfect wife for sure, but to put him first and to constantly seek relationship. If I just said to him on our wedding day, you know how I feel about you, we're good. It had to be vows that I spoke that I will love and cherish you. And I spoke a vow, and to realize that we have to do the same thing with Jesus. We can't just say, hey, we're good and feel about you. Jason takes me on regular date nights, and we have to stay in relationship by spending time with each other. And so then when I think about if I'm just hey, God, on Sundays, I'm going to worship you, and then we're good, that's not a true covenant relationship. And so learning to be with Jesus every day, just like I be with my husband in intimacy of just a relationship, talking, visiting, I think that's to me, that's the greatest benefit, is seeing how my responses to Jesus through represented physically with the way I am with Jason.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good question.
Kind of scared.
Don't worry, I just came up with it.
Right. That's what I'm scared.
Okay. Ms. Snell, I know you've been through your share of ups and downs with your story of falling out of that tree, and I didn't know that until probably last year, and I've known you for almost 4 years now, and that really opened my eyes to, wow, that's a really good story. And I know you struggled a lot through T-Bar-M. That was my freshman and sophomore year. We've had conversations trying to literally figure out the timeline of when we met and told that story of how you shouldn't feel like that was where God's called you to be, and it didn't feel right, so you came back here and you think this is a good place. Your struggles through dance and ballet and up and down, and now that you're in this stage of life, what do you feel that God has called you to do?
You recapped my story really well, so way to go. All my struggles. What do I feel like God has called me to do right now?
Mm-hmm. After everything that you've been through.
Yeah. I think what's really cool is that we've talked about this, but just the uniqueness of the path that the Lord led me on, starting in college to getting here. Mm-hmm. And just a lot how the Lord taught me to follow where he was calling and to take the next obedient step. Something that I always say, what's the next obedient step? And so that step is right here at MCA. I truly feel like this is where the Lord has called me to be, and he hasn't called me to go away from here. And so I feel like it is living in obedience to continue teaching at MCA. And it is a joy and an honor because I get to meet people like you and get to learn and grow from rubbing up against other people.
Yes, ma'am.
Calleigh, you did a great job today. I'm very proud of you. And I just want to pray over you before we end. Dear God, I thank you so much for Calleigh, Lord. I thank you that you knit her together in her mother's womb. And before she was even born, and while she was being formed, you knew her. And Lord, that you called her. Lord, I thank you that Calleigh has put her hope in you, and that we praise you that you are her Savior and her God. And Lord, I just ask for favor in Calleigh's life as she goes off to college and she starts just a new journey past middle and classical. Lord, I ask for your favor to be on her. Lord, I ask that you will just continue to show her how you pursue her, you love her, you dance over her, you rejoice over her with singing, and that you call her to walk in integrity and in truth, that you just will call out your name, Yahweh, to her. You show her mercy and compassion, Lord. Let her have favor wherever she goes, and to constantly walk in your will and to stay just keeping her eyes focused on you. We just bless her, and we thank you for Calleigh's life here at MCA. In your name I pray. Amen.
Amen.